Hey guys, Deadlock has a Shiv problem. Let me elaborate. From the beginning of Shiv's inception, when he was added to the game, Shiv has either dominated or been terrible, and nobody can agree whether he's really good or really bad. On one hand, you've got his win rate that's in the dumpster.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
But on the other hand, this is what happens every time there's a pro tournament.
As second pick, you're probably going to ban Shiv because you don't want Shiv to be taken first where his overall level of power is. So this may just be the first ban, first pick all day long, regardless of team, is how I'm looking at it right now.
So is Shiv bad or is Shiv actually broken? Let's talk about it. Hey guys, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Dethi, and today we're going to be talking about the Shiv quote-unquote problem in Deadlock. Now, to talk about it a little bit, Shiv's got a 45% win rate in Phantom and above right now in matchmaking, and I talked about it. In pro play, he's pretty much first banned in all the most recent fight nights and largely seen as OP, and keeps receiving nerf after nerf from the development team. So which is it? I essentially call this the Shiv dilemma. OP in pro play, terrible win rate in pubs. Doesn't mean it's terrible though. Why is his win rate terrible? The first thing we got to understand is what's the difference between pro play and pubs. And there's obviously a lot of difference. Like the overall skill level is, much more elevated. I didn't put all the differences here, but in pro play, you've got very consistently 12 players that are very good at the game. Whereas in pubs, it varies a lot and matchmaking is kind of all over the place. For example, it's not uncommon that, someone like me who will play in fight night will also just get matched with an Oracle one game, right? And so matchmaking has a lot more variables. It's a lot more random. And essentially in pro play, it's very coordinated. The quality of players is very stable. You can draft around specific heroes, right? And this is very relevant, and I'll talk about why. Let me just get my laser pointer. Drafting around specific heroes is very, very relevant. And then people will also itemize to counter and enable, right? This is also very, very important. And there's more team fights. Now, there's not more fighting. There's actually less fighting in pro play than there is in pubs, but the fighting is more controlled and it's more like it tends to be bigger fights, right? In pubs, there's a lot of like 1v1s or 2v2s or smaller engagements. In pro play, that's a little bit rarer. You'll see a lot of 3v3s or 4v4s over objectives like the Urn or Walkers or things like that. Now, in pubs, on the other hand, you have bad itemization, people just buying random stuff, people playing selfish, not buying to counter or enable their teammates. Draft is fully random, so you don't know who you're going to get on your team or against your team, with or against Shiv. There's less team fights, there's just more skirmishes, more random skirmishes all over the place. So, and player quality, differs, and the pub quality differs and all that stuff. And of course, the sample size is pretty low either way. Pro play has an extremely low sample size, whereas pubs, much higher sample size, but still kind of low when you look at high rank pubs. Now let's talk about a few points quickly. So I want to talk about can draft around specific heroes. So let's go in game for a second, talk about certain combos or counters. So if we look at the roster of heroes, at the moment, I would say that there are certain heroes that pair extremely well with Shiv and others maybe not so much. So for example, Shiv and Kelvin is a very, very normal combo and comp play that you'll see extremely often. And the idea is fairly simple. Shiv's biggest weakness is his vulnerability to damage over time, and the fact that he defers damage essentially makes regen incredibly strong on him, and Kelvin has the best healing in the game, being Dome. So if you Dome your Shiv with an enemy, Shiv is just going to kill the enemy. There's zero chance your Shiv dies in Dome, pretty much. Like the enemy team needs a ton of anti-heal to make this happen. Similarly, Shiv likes playing with heroes that can dish out a lot of damage and get people low for him in the team fights, right? Heroes like these can include, Warden or Wraith that can get a lot of targets low, and Shiv can just kind of clean up and execute them. On top of that, there are some counters to Shiv that are quite annoying to play against. For example, Pocket. So if you're in competitive play and you're drafting, you can pick Pocket on your team or ban it from the enemy team, thus enabling your Shiv pick to do even more work. In pubs, you can't control any of these variables. Now let's talk a little bit about the itemization to counter and enable. So itemizing to counter Shiv is fairly straightforward. Generally, there are a few counters. There's slowing hex, there's decay, which is anti-heal. So you essentially need to, slowing hex counters his dash and his execute because he can't use them during it. Decay is anti-heal, so basically any anti-heal is good against Shiv. Now let's look at all the available options. So you've got Healbane, Toxic Bullets, Decay, Crippling Headshot, Inhibitor, and Spirit Burn. Now, people can buy counter items in competitive play, right? But the current state of the game, it makes it very difficult to get more than one tier 4 item in the competitive scene, because most games end before 30 minutes, meaning that you only get one tier 4 because it's important that you keep buying to hit your power spikes most of the time. Now, this doesn't always happen, but very often you'll see pro players with only maybe 1 or 2 tier 4 items. This means that the best options for anti-heal are Healbane, Toxic Bullets, and Decay. Not everybody can buy Toxic Bullets. Healbane is not that good of an anti-heal option. It's minus 35%. And Decay, while it gives a lot of anti-heal, is also once again not easy to build on everyone. All of these can also be removed by the item Debuff Remover, which is a must-buy on Shiv anyway, right? So some of these counters, he just uses Debuff Remover. Now, as far as items that enable him, well, a lot of items that have been pretty meta have enabled him fairly hard recently. Before, the previous culprit was Healing Nova. Healing Nova was just extremely prevalent, and having a lot of Healing Novas on your team in general, who would have thought having a lot of healing with a hero who, you know, whose kit is just deferring damage, and then you can heal it, is very strong. And now we're seeing a lot of people buy Rescue Beam, which also heals you for a ton and really enables you to just pocket your Shiv and kind of just wait until everybody gets low so your Shiv can pop off execute after execute. Now, let's talk for a second about Shiv's kit and its problems, right? So for those of you that know what this item is, I'm not going to tell you guys what this is, but hey, if you recognize it, you're an OG. If you don't recognize it, that's okay. Just enjoy the little, cameo. So Shiv has a global damage amp. He has damage deferred, being his passive, bloodletting, and he has a % health execute that refreshes when he kills someone once it's maxed. To me, when Shiv is OP, these are the issues. This is also a lot of Shiv's strengths, right? Other than these things, he doesn't really have any other strengths. So his problems are essentially his strengths, right? It's not like he has a lot of strengths that aren't problematic. I would say the one strength that he has that isn't really problematic is, the special abilities that he gets from Rage. For example, his knives are usually not problematic, right? Sometimes they are, but usually it's item-based, but it's not the knives themselves that are problematic. His dash is not really problematic. The fact that he's strong in close quarters environment is not really problematic. What is problematic is these interactions with the game and a lot of its mechanics, and the current Deadlock that we play. Global damage amp essentially means that whatever damage item is meta at the time, Shiv can just abuse better than most other heroes, because he's really one of the only heroes that gets consistent damage amp. So there's other heroes that get damage amp, such as Calico, Pocket, etc. But Shiv has it when his rage is full, and it's not that hard to get rage full, and it basically in fights you're going to have full rage most of the time. His damage deferred also means that whatever, tank items is best or healing items is best, he's best at abusing them. And then the % health execute means that if you're ever in a meta where tanky heroes are problematic, which we are a little bit in right now, although it's much better than it was, then Shiv thrives as well. Now, this essentially also means that his scaling is insane without investing much into damage, because his execute, once you get the late game, will literally just do 1,000 damage. It'll essentially just kill someone when they're at 1,000 health. Now, there's not a lot of other abilities in the game that just do 1,000 damage that can be refreshed, right? The only ability that's similar would be Grey Talon's Bird, which is, first of all, a fairly long cooldown, cannot be refreshed. Yes, it can hit multiple targets, so it does have that advantage. And yes, it can deal over 1,000 damage, certainly. But, it also makes it so Grey Talon is AFK while he's doing it. Shiv is just moving around, executing, going in, dashing, executing other people. So these are essentially the biggest issues people have with Shiv's kit. And in my opinion, this is, the reason why he's very, very often banned or picked extremely early in drafts. So we've established a few things. We've established that Shiv has a really bad win rate right now in pubs, but he's also constantly first banned in pro play. We've also established that there are a few issues with Shiv, and that there's, significant differences between pro play and pub play. Now, the final thing is, what is my whole take on the situation? Do I think Shiv is OP, or is Shiv bad, or what is it, right? So one thing I want to talk about is balancing around pro play versus balancing for the masses, I guess you could call it. I think at the end of the day, you generally want to balance for the higher end of players. What that means is, like, let's say that you take the rank from Eternus to any other rank. I think you want to balance for Eternus rather than balancing for Archons. Now, the idea is fairly simple to understand. Let me illustrate this. So this is a graph of skill level over time. Okay, so I want to illustrate a point. So we're just going to draw a couple points in time, right? So we're going to say, first of all, let's look at an Eternus player. Okay. So when they start, let's say that the Eternus player's skill level starts and they start right here on the skill chart. This is skill through time. And now their rate of improvement is going to be quite high, and they just go kind of like this, right? And then it kind of keeps going forever. Now an Archon player might start here on the chart, and his skill of improvement is kind of going to go like this, right? And eventually what happens is that the Archon player at some point will become as good as the Eternus player once was, right? So if you look right here and you draw a line, the Eternus player's starting skill level matches the Archon player's skill level at this point in time, if that makes sense, right? So my argument for why balancing should be done towards a higher level is because the higher level of play will spot issues with the game before the lower level of play can ever spot them, right? But it's not that they're not real issues for the average player. It's more so that the average player hasn't realized that they're an issue yet, if that makes sense, right? A good example is Healing Nova. The Healing Nova meta kind of like trickled down a little bit from, you know, pro play and stuff like that. And so a lot of people will follow the meta and see these things, but, you know, they might not realize why these things are happening, and they just kind of follow along with whatever the pros are doing. So generally, I think that as a philosophy, it makes sense to balance for the most part around, you know, the high level, because they're going to figure out what the problems are before the average player gets there. But the average player would have gotten there eventually, right? It would have just taken them maybe 6 months longer. With that said, with the fact that, you know, you should balance around pro play, well, not pro play, but high level play, I don't know if you should necessarily balance around tournament play. And the reason for that is because at the moment, well, tournament play is very limited. It's an extremely small niche scene, and there's not a lot of teams, right? I'm on one of the few North American teams, and there's a few European teams, but like realistically, as far as competitive teams in Europe, I can't imagine that there's more than, you know, 5 or 6 at a time. And in North America, I mean, as far as actual competitive teams, you could say there's, you know, 3 or 4 at a time. I wouldn't even consider us that competitive at the moment. So maybe 3, maybe 4, depending on the time. You know, it's fairly limited amount of people. With this limited amount of people, you know, there's a very, very small echo chamber and extremely low diversity of strategies when you compare it to other games like Dota that might have a lot of people trying different things. Now, with all of that being said, I personally think that Shiv is still incredibly strong, but I'm not sure if he, you know, should get nerfed much more than he is. I think with Shiv, he should receive a slight nerf, and then he'll probably reach a point where he's fairly balanced for the average players. But at the moment, his win rate kind of indicates that for the average player, he doesn't seem to be that much of a threat, even though he can feel like a raid boss sometimes. At pro play, he's still a raid boss, right? But it's possible that Shiv is just in a fairly healthy state for the average player. Now, with that said, this may be a bit of a hot take, and I do think that they should consider reworking parts of his kit. For example, bloodletting, because I think that this ability is incredibly difficult to balance. But considering how long this ability's been into the game, I don't think they're going to rework it anytime soon. The last point I have to make is this just Shiv? And the answer is no. If you look at other heroes' win rates, and we can take a look at Stat Locker real quick, Ivy, Sinclair, Viscous, Hayes, etc., are all in similar situations where their success in competitive play is much higher than their win rates is in pub. For example, Hayes recently has been seeing a lot more success in competitive play and has been banned from, you know, nearly every second phase in Europe. So they clearly see her as a, you know, strong hero. And yet in pubs, her win rate does not reflect that. Viscous is seen as a fairly strong hero, at least in North America, and in pubs, his win rate is horrible, right? So sometimes heroes that are hard to pilot are also going to have lower win rates. So that's another factor. Let's take a look at some of them. So here we're on Stat Locker, and we just have the rank range from Phantom 1 to Eternus 6. And we can take a look and see Grey Talon, 42% win rate. Now, that's not that surprising. In pro play, you know, he's pretty much never touched. I haven't seen him picked in a very long time. Makes sense. Viscous, this hero gets picked a decent amount, 43% win rate. That seems pretty low. Shiv, 45%. We already talked about. Vindicta, 46%. Now, she's not being picked a ton. Makes sense. Sinclair, 46%. I think Sinclair is pretty good now. Ivy, 47%. I think Ivy's really good. And then Hayes and Yamato. And then some of these other heroes, it makes a little bit more sense, right? And then some of the heroes at the top, I mean, most of these make sense, except all of a sudden, McGinnis. 54% right now. McGinnis only has 278 matches within this kind of like rank range. So the sample size in general is a problem both in pubs and in pro play. With all of this being said, I just wanted to shed some light and maybe share some of my opinions about the Shiv situation, because I've seen balanced discussions go in both ways. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this type of video, and if you have any thoughts about the way that Shiv should be balanced, or in general, the approach that the developers should be balanced. I'm sure that they're listening and that, you know, they want everyone's feedback. So feel free to give any feedback in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good one.